Hi, I'm Coach Corey Wayne, and this is my video coaching newsletter. And the topic of today's newsletter is going to be when your relationship is over and you're the last one to notice. Well, I've got an email from a guy who there's a little bit of BSing himself going on in here. Obviously, he's trying to BS me a little bit. But what's amusing to me about these emails is that when you understand women, when you understand the things that are in 3% man, it doesn't matter where in the world the guy is or where the girl is from or the cultural or spiritual background. There are very specific things that women say when men are turning them off. And it's just global. Doesn't matter. Language barriers, it's like they literally say the same exact things. And so when somebody writes me an email, and because us guys, we're very egocentric and we don't like to, especially when it comes to women, admit that we don't know what we're doing or we're wrong. What I often see in these emails is the guys trying to puff themselves up a little bit and, oh, I've always been successful with women. I've always had this, and I've always been great, and I've never gotten dumped. Well, until this one time. And then when you go through the email and you read the things that the woman is saying, he's got his actions he's claiming to do, but what the woman is saying, how he's making her feel, tells me everything about his actual behavior. Because again, women say the same things, and it doesn't matter what country they're from, what their language is. It's like when you translate it, it all says the same stuff. And so it's why I can read these emails. I can tell when someone's trying to bullshit me or they're bullshitting themselves. And they're trying to make themselves look better because deep down they know they really screwed up. And so this particular guy, he says he read 3% Man about 8 years ago. And he says 8 times, at least 8 times in that period. But after that, he stopped reading it. So that tells me more than likely he didn't really take the time to, because it's one thing to read it, but you really, the experience and the wisdom comes from applying it. And so you can read the book 1,000 times, but if you're not really applying it and trying to get better and constantly going back to the book, just like you would if you're taking a college class that's very difficult, which this stuff is not easy. Self-help is not easy. The things I teach are not easy. What I teach is not a shortcut to success. It's hard, and it's not easy, especially when you're dealing with your own emotions. But you have to constantly be applying this stuff and getting feedback in the real world and then be reviewing the information, much like when Tom Brady was playing in the NFL. It's not like he reads the playbook at the beginning of the season and then throws that in the back of his locker and never looks at it again. It's constant review of the playbook. Then they go out in the field, they run the plays, they film themselves running the plays, then they come back in and they watch themselves running the plays on film, and they compare that to what's in the playbook. They review the playbook again. People discuss their roles. Then they go back out in the field and they practice it again. And it's day in and day out. Repetition is the mother of skill. They're trying to get better. And so when somebody starts learning work like mine and they get to the point where like, hey, I got this, and then they don't ever go back to the book again because, again, it's been 8 years at this point. And so more than likely that's like 2015 then when he read it. So more than likely that's before the audiobook even came out. So maybe he's got his dates a little wrong because he did say he listened to the audiobook 8 years ago. So maybe it was in 2016 when it first came out. But this relationship he's writing in about started 3 years ago, right around the time that all the lockdowns happened. So by the time it'd been like 5 years since he had looked at my book or even really studied this stuff. And like I said, I don't know what degree, but I can definitely tell, because I've been through his email, that he's doing a lot of self-bullshitting here. And like, just to give you an example, it's the relationship was great for the first year, and then I'll get into it in a minute, but some changes he made in his life, because he was trying to help out some family members of his, it's like the sex stopped. And he's like, but we stayed together, but like they didn't have sex for almost 2 years. And so if you're in a relationship with somebody and you haven't had sex for 2 years, you're roommates, you're friends, you've been friend zoned. And just because that person may be physically with you, if there's no physical intimacy, you don't have a relationship. Your relationship is over. You're friends. And that's just the way things are. And you can't bullshit your way out of that. Those are the facts. And so there's stuff like that going on in here. And so recently he got ghosted about a month and a half ago. And he's like, oh, she's been doing all the pursuing. And other than the last week or two, I admit that I called her and pursued her a little bit. But when I look at what she said to him, the words that she used, it's obvious he was over pursuing and he was making her feel smothered and like she's losing her freedom. But in the previous paragraph, he's representing as if she's doing all the pursuing and everything's great. But when I look at the words that she says, and I know that, yeah, he's kind of full of shit on his explanation. He's bullshitting himself. And so that's why he thinks everything was fine, even though they hadn't had sex for almost 2 years. So you got to see reality as it is, not better than it is like he was, or worse than it is. You got to, where are things based on the other person's actions? So with that said, let's go through this email. He says, hey, Coach, longtime listener, first-time writer. I came across your book and content almost 8 years ago, and I listened to the audiobook at least 8 times in that period. Well, if you haven't looked at it since then, it's like, how are you going to practice and get better? Because you're going to forget that information, especially when you consider this relationship started basically 5 years since the last time he read it. So he says, over the years, I've been very successful with women thanks to you, to the point where I have never been broken up with until now. I started dating this lady about 3 years ago, and the first year was amazing. Sex all the time, hanging out every weekend, trips, and I even met her extended family. As we got deeper into the COVID times, I found out my grandmother and uncle needed help financially, and both of them live in another country. As a result, I moved in with my mom and took on extra projects at work to help with the finances, leaving very limited time for my lady. Well, as the book says, if you don't date and court your wife, or your girlfriend in this case, eventually some other man will. There's a chapter in the book that says the courtship never ends, and you cannot end your courtship because you want to help out family members and just neglect your girl. That's not going to work. You're not going to be able to maintain the relationship with her. Eventually she's going to tire of it, and she's going to leave you or find another guy and then leave you in monkey branch. Just depends on her character and her integrity level, on whether or not she tells you about it or she does it behind your back and then you find out about it after the fact. And the other thing is you got to look at is that you moved in with your mother and take on these extra projects to send money to people in another country, which that sounds like a nice, noble thing to do. But also, if you look at it, is that really the best way to live your life? Because you got to be happy and fulfilled as well. Because you can't, in other words, it's like you can't suffer enough in your own life to make somebody else happy. You can't make yourself so broke that somebody else becomes rich. And if you're in a relationship with a woman and you got a nice lifestyle and she gets used to a relationship with you being stable, and all of a sudden you move back in with your mom and you hardly ever see her and you don't date her anymore, that is not the same person that she committed to in a relationship. You completely changed that all on your own unilaterally. So he says, that took 1.5 years, and she was with me through it all. However, sex stopped during that time. Yeah, if you are going to write an email to me and claim that you're always great with women and you always know what you're doing and things are awesome, and then with a straight face you're going to be like, oh yeah, we didn't have sex for 1.5 years. It's like, come on, man. Do you really expect me to take anything that you say seriously after that? If you're not having sex with your girlfriend for 1.5 years, you don't have a girlfriend. You have a friend. You, I would say, are her gay male girlfriend. That's just not a relationship anymore. And besides, if you weren't spending much time with her anyways, you were just friends. He says, she broke up with me in December of 2022 because she felt I didn't have the time for her, but kept hovering around. Obviously, she cared and was still hoping you would turn things around to get back to the way it was in the first year. And he says, as the book says, when she reaches out, make a date. So we dated for the last 6 months, and in that time I was able to complete my financial responsibilities to my family and start a new venture. Well, he didn't say anything about sex. He didn't say the sex resumed. He just said they were dating. He said the venture is a little unstable at the moment. Yeah, if you're unstable financially as a man, it's going to be really hard to maintain a stable relationship. And that's why guys that are unstable typically tend to date more casually, friends with benefits, that kind of thing. And you could tell it's like it totally consumed him to the point where he just did not make it a priority to date and court his girlfriend properly. Well, she wasn't really his girlfriend anymore at that point anyways, because they were no longer having sex. He says, but if my calculations are correct, I'll be stable in about 3 months, October, November timeframe. Well, if you're starting a new business, typically it takes way longer and way more money than you ever expect it to. So more than likely, smart men would say, I know your projections say 3 months, but more than likely it might take 3 years. So you have to, it's nice to plan and hope for the best, but you also got to plan for what if your assumptions are wrong? What if your plans don't work out? He says, well, mid-June was the last time I spoke to her on the phone. She and I had a wonderful conversation one day. And the next day I chose to call and make a date. One of the few times I actually reached out, as she did 80 to 90% of the calling and texting. Well, if you were actually following what I teach in the book and in 7 Principles Get an Expert, because you got dumped last year, 100% of the calling, texting, and pursuing should be done by her when she's the one that unilaterally ends the relationship. But you're not following that. You're doing your own thing because, again, you haven't been through the book in 8 years, so this is not surprising that you're still pursuing somebody that dumped you. And more than likely over-pursuing and doing more of the pursuing than he's claiming in the email. He says 80 to 90%. Maybe at times it was that. But again, when you see her responses and what she actually said to him and how she treated him, obvious he was doing something different. He says, but I was forwarded to email or voicemail. He says the next day I called and again got forwarded to her voicemail. So now what is that? So he's triple messaged her. These are things right out of the book that you should not be doing. So he's panicking. He's over pursuing. He's leaving her messages. She's not responding. He's messaging her again. She's not responding. He's messaging her again. And remember, this is the guy that's like, oh, she's doing all the pursuing. He says, I then sent a text, so now it's a 4th time he's messaging her, asking if she is okay, to which she promptly responded, yes, I need time to myself. So in other words, you're smothering me, dude. A woman does not communicate that she's being smothered by you and needs time to herself when you're letting her come to you. So I have what he described that he's doing, but I have her words. And so her words cut right through all of his bullshit that he wrote. Because he's obviously bullshitting himself. He says, I responded with, that's okay and understandable. Just communicate that with me. He says, I haven't heard from her since. And that's been 3 weeks now. And a few days ago, she posted the chorus to Beyonce's Best I Never Had to her Instagram stories. So every time you're watching her Instagram stories, you're like fangirling her. And she can see that you're watching her Instagram stories. More over pursuit. These are all things that are covered in 7 Principles Get an X Back and the book. And so you're doing the opposite of what I teach. Even though you're writing, claiming, hey, I'm doing everything as normal. And I've noticed she has tagged her location in a few locations that are very unusual for her on Facebook. And meaning to me, I allowed someone to get to her. She is a really good woman and someone I can see a future with. Bro, your relationship ended a couple years ago when you stopped having sex with her. Elvis has left the building and you're the last dude to know. He says, I actually don't mind this hiccup if there is another guy. Come on, man. As I need the next few months to get my business together and move back on my own. So I think it's great that she's with Chad Thundercock and he can keep her busy and keep having sex with her even though I'm not having sex with her, and I'll keep jerking off to my visual Rolodex of her and the other ladies from my past. But notice he's like, I'm going to put the courtship off in the future, and once I get my act together, then I'll start dating her again, and things will be great. Meanwhile, she gets a vote in this, and she's ignoring him. She's ghosted him completely. Probably because she found somebody else. Obviously, I mean, you stopped having sex with her a couple years ago. It's like, duh. Elvis has left the building, bro. She's not your girlfriend anymore. Sounds like she's somebody else's. He says, however, once I'm there, what should be the best plan of approach? And at this moment, what is the right move? Well, read the book again. And you should be following what's in 7 Principles to Get an Ex Back. And you should remember a simple concept from the book about dating being like tennis. You hit the ball over the net, and you must wait for her to hit it back. And the last time you messaged her, you sent a barrage of 4 messages until she basically said, leave me the hell alone. And yet you're writing me going, what else can I do, Corey? I need the illusion of action. I should text her and call her more to prove to her that I really care. So, again, you said that she's been doing all the chasing for the last 6 months, when in reality, I can look at her words and go, that's bullshit. So what it looks like is that she's blown you off because she's dating somebody else and exploring things with him. And if you keep calling and texting her and fangirling all of her Instagram stories and treating her like a celebrity, she'll probably block you or get a restraining order against you. So you need to knock it off, dude. You need to get back into the material because you're doing literally the opposite of what the book teaches. So you shouldn't be surprised or shocked that you got blue balls and your relationship actually ended about 2 years ago. It's like you had a girlfriend for about a year and you hung out as friends ever since. And when she finally lined up a new guy because you continued to over pursue, then she ghosted you. That's where you're at. He says, I want to send her a text to explain my stance on where things are with me from a stability standpoint and express no hard feelings if she thought it was time to leave. Bro, your relationship ended 2 years ago. She left a long time ago. She's just been friends with you ever since. And so when she's already ignored your last 4 attempts to contact her, sending her a 5th attempt, it's like you can't possibly be thinking that that's a good idea. Again, this is what you're wanting to do and you have been doing is the opposite of what the book teaches. So you should not be shocked that you're ghosted. As I understand, my situation got complicated over the last 2 years, then go no contact until she reaches out if she does. Well, you're kind of already in no contact because, again, she said, I need space. And this is discussed in 7 Principles to Get an Ex Back. It's also discussed in the book. When somebody wants space, that says you're smothering me. I feel like I'm losing my freedom. You're kind of acting like a stalker. Leave me the hell alone. That's what that means. It doesn't mean text me 5 fucking times in a row and I ignore you all 5 times and then you try to come up with a reason of why you should text or call a 6th time. He says, or is no contact at all the best route? Again, dating is like tennis. You should have just left that one message and waited to hear from her. But again, you were claiming she was doing all the pursuing, and so all I have to do is look at her actions and her words and realize everything you wrote to me was bullshit. And it's obvious you're bullshitting yourself, and that's why I'm giving you this harsh dose of reality, is to bring you back to earth and stop living in La La Land, because you're like in an alternate reality here. I'd really like to get her back once I'm stable. We'll get to a happy place and get stable. And if she happens to reach out at that time, you can make a date, hang out, have fun, hook up. Pretty simple. And I want to make the right move now to set me up in the future, as I know there's a 97% chance this dude will fail. Well, you've already failed, and you are out of her life. She has ignored you. She's told you to leave her alone, and yet you're still trying to come up with reasons and justifications to keep chasing after her. Instead of just following what's in 7 Principles, Get an Ex Back, and let her come to you and just make a date at your place. Well, you live with your mom still, so you got to put your big boy pants on and be an adult. You need a place. That's probably one of the reasons why she didn't want to have sex with you if you were always at your mom's house. So she started dating a guy who was a man, and then you kind of turned into a man baby. Unfortunately, that's the way it is, dude. It's harsh. I know it's not what you want to hear, but I mean, 2 years ago, you stopped having sex with this girl. It's like, what are you thinking? You weren't together. He says, this isn't a case of one-itis, as I know there are many other women out there, and my female orbiters have smelt blood and have begun reaching out. I just trust this woman emphatically, and she is exactly what I'm looking for. Really? No sex for 2 years? And you're like, Corey, that's my dream girl. Sex for no 2 years? This is great. I'm totally down. Let's make a lifetime partnership of this. It's like, come on, dude. You need to pull your head out of your ass because it is firmly way stuck up there. Maybe you get some people to help you pull it out. But you got to get back to the basics and start reading the book and actually applying what's in there, because if you keep going the direction you're going, you're going to get a restraining order against you. It's like, you need to knock it off. I mean, seriously. Let her come to you. I mean, you're chasing this girl right out of your life to the point where now she's ignoring you, and you're going, oh, I should just contact her again and tell her how I'll be stable in 6 months, and then we can date. It's like, just let it be, bro. So if you got a question or a challenge and you'd like to get my help, go to understandingrelationships.com, click the products tab at the top of your screen, and book a coaching session with yours truly. Until next time, I will talk to you soon.